Welcome once again to the Brazilian Shirt Name podcast. The Legendino is in Rio. We're talking World Cup matters this afternoon, Legendino. But before we get into that, may I be the first to say to you, you lot have had your fun, yeah? You've had your fun. You've had your fun. Whilst you were having your fun, having your shirt off, having your fun, we were freezing in our whatsits. Well, it's time for the tables to turn, because may I be the first to say to you, summertime and the living is easy.
Can't go on.
Yeah, no, it won't last forever, obviously, but for the next 4 or 5 months, we will be in summertime and you will be in the depths of winter.
It's the hottest day of the year. You can do something, you can do something, you can do nothing, or you can do the right thing. What are you going to do?
Go on, let's do the right thing and introduce our guest for the podcast this afternoon, all the way from Cincinnati in the United States. We've got Joe Gould with us. Joe, good afternoon from us. I suppose it's morning for you, is it?
Yeah, it actually just turned noon, so we're in afternoon as well.
Yeah, you are on Tim's side for today's conversation.
That's right.
Yeah, that's right, Tim. Do you need this kind of support? You've left me on my own, being the only European in the house who wonders what is the point of World Cup qualifiers. We know who needs to be there.
Selfish. You're so you English. You are so selfish. Look, you want all the best players in the world.
Yeah, of course,
that are produced by other countries. And you want them 52 weeks in a year. You can't have them. You can have them for most of the time, but let them go back to where they come from, just occasionally. And is this, I ask you, is this really too much to ask for?
Well, it kind of is, because we've got a packed Premier League calendar. Anyway, that aside, as Joe's here on your side, Joe, tell us a little bit about yourself. What do you do?
Yeah, I am the co-host and producer of The Window, an international football podcast, and also a huge fan of World Football Phone-In. So I called in a couple weeks ago, and you guys are the inspiration behind a large part of what we do. So ours is specifically based around national team football. We don't really talk a whole lot about club, but as both of you are aware, the two are always intertwined in some form or fashion. So it always sneaks its way in. So I'm looking forward to the conversation today.
It really is a pleasure having you with us, not least because, of course, the Trump World Cup is just around the corner. And it's predicted to be, I mean, this is the first stat that I get about the World Cup. It just shows you where it is this time around. First stat I get is that it's reputed to be the most lucrative World Cup ever. It's going to make more money than even Donald Trump could imagine in his wildest dreams. And it's going to be the greatest ever World Cup the world has ever known.
It's going to be
beautiful. Is it, though? Are Americans buying into it yet or not?
Yeah, I think it depends on who you talk to. I don't want to get political. I didn't vote for him, but it's there is building excitement. But again, I think it's a lot of who you talk to right now. If you're a soccer fan, they're pretty in tune, or should I say a football fan? They're very in tune and looking forward to it. For everybody else, at least here in the States, it's not quite on their radar yet. I don't think we've reached that point. So for myself, for my co-hosts, for some of my friends, we're all very excited and hoping that it comes off without a hitch. We're eagerly anticipating it and hoping, that it goes well.
This is one of the things that fascinates me about my knowledge of the States is extremely limited. But on football is and always has been a game of the city. And as I understand it, the cities are not really Trump territory. Trump territory is much, much more suburbs and rural areas. So football is almost like a bulwark of the more cosmopolitan people in the States who aren't natural Trump supporters. I wonder how this is going to play out, and also how it's going to play out the try hosting given the fact that relations with Canada and Mexico are both extremely strained. How is this? Because this is a World Cup where you cannot ignore the politics. The politics are going to be all over it. How do you think, Joe, that some of these things are going to play out?
That is a great question. And I don't know if we know the answer to that quite yet, but you keyed in on something that I think is very important, the strained relationships that are already forming with our current president in office between us, Canada, and Mexico. So again, something that we're kind of keeping an eye on and hoping that maybe in this instance, there is a definitive separation between sport and politics to pull this off. I don't know. It's also going to be interesting because, and I'm sure we'll get into this, but Iran just qualified for the World Cup as well. And so they will be coming here to play, which makes things interesting in a political sense as well, based off of past history, right? So
it's interesting though, because underlying all of this, and you're both quite right, it'll be it's impossible. In fact, politics is already pervading this World Cup. Infantino going to suck up to Donald Trump was one of the most nauseating things that I've witnessed as a football fan who wants to just go and see a spectacle and bring the world together through this very unique, very different from an Olympic Games, a similar kind of concept, unique sporting event, which is the World Cup. And the World Cup has always been seen, or FIFA's always seen sport and football as being away from politics. Now they have themselves tied themselves into the politics. Andy Brassel, our good friend, the top brass, said to me just last week that, well, part of the problem is now that FIFA has seen how much money the Champions League makes, the Champions League being the biggest or most lucrative football tournament in the world. And they want a slice of that. And, America doing this, the focus has been on America in terms of trying to get the people of America to embrace football in the way that they embrace their major four sports. However, this is an opportunity for that. Do you see that as a good or a bad thing? Because, if you sup with the devil, you get me.
Yeah. That's a really good question. To be honest, I'm fence sitting here because I don't know. It's the whole thing is going to be curious. I think we will see packed stadiums. I think we'll see full stadiums. Tickets are going to be really hard to come by, I would guess. And I think they're going to be quite pricey as well. And obviously the travel required could be quite difficult too. So, I mean, there's going to be a lot of different factors that are coming into this World Cup in terms of how to pull this off. I can speak from experience that I know that FIFA is struggling, at least for the Club World Cup, which is coming here this summer as well, to find volunteers to help put it together. So, the Club World Cup is one thing. The FIFA World Cup is a totally different animal, but there's still a lot of work to do before at least I feel like we're fully prepared for this thing to come off.
Putting the politics aside, do you think the aim of football breaking into the space of those big four American sports, do you think that's viable? Do you think that can happen?
Yeah, I do actually. I think it's very interesting. I don't know if you guys knew, but they recently brought U.S. Soccer recently announced that the the USL is going to be a top tier league. They're going to be in the same division as MLS. So we're going to have two Division Ones going on here, which is going to be interesting. And then shortly after that, USL announced that they're going to start implementing promotion relegation, which will be the first of its kind here in the United States. I'm personally very excited about that, and I think USL is on the right track. But MLS and USL as a whole, I think, and the sport as a whole is growing, and I think there is momentum behind it. I think it could overcome. I think we could see it push out the likes of maybe baseball or, NFL is obviously king. That's a very hard one to perhaps overcome. But the NBA, the Major League Baseball, those are sports that we're starting to see fans who are kind of dropping away from the game. It's either too long or too boring, or, they're just shooting 3-pointers the whole game and there's no tactics to it, right? You bring in something like football, introduce people to the game where there's a tactical thing that you have to think through. It really can. I think it can find space as we go forward here. Yeah.
Can it please not take baseball's space? And I'm fascinated with the importance of baseball to US culture.
It is very important.
It's really interesting history there, actually, and
it is.
Both to black and white US culture, by the way. Bill, with the Jackie Robinson and Negro leagues now getting their historic recognition, but isn't it the wrong sort of attitude or strategy to try and compete with those other leagues? I was in the US for the World Cup in '94, and I arrived at JFK, I think it was, or no, it was probably not JFK, the one out in Brooklyn. What's the other one? It's not JFK, not LaGuardia. What's the other airport?
No, but at least it wasn't
Newark.
George Bush International Airport in Houston. It wasn't that.
I think it was Newark.
The only time I went to the States, I landed at George Bush International Airport, and there's this message coming across: passengers wishing to reclaim their firearms. I'm thinking, for crying out loud.
That was a long time ago. It's changed since then, mate. But I remember arriving and seeing the bus driver that picked me up, that was going to drive into Manhattan. He was reading the sports pages of newspapers, and there wasn't a single word on football. It was like 4 or 5 pages, and it was just coverage. And I'm like, why are you trying to compete with that? That already has its space and its landscape and its demographic. Whereas football is something different. And one thing that I've experienced from America is they love things from overseas. It's a shock to me. I think Haagen-Dazs is actually an American company, but they thought they'd give it a little bit of a, exotic European feel by calling it something with different letters in the English alphabet. And not only that, and you kind of alluded to where my question is going in a previous answer, Joe, in talking about the price of tickets. Football in America, apart from immigrant communities from South America, the Caribbean, and elsewhere, football, if you like, the indigenous American of the last 100, 200 years or so, is a middle-class sport. I mean, first of all, it was a female sport. This is a unique history that we're now just recognizing women's football over here. And I just wonder whether the football authorities in America are pursuing the wrong hare.
It's possible. I mean, the game here has a lot of flaws, I guess we could say, as you've already mentioned, in terms of youth playing. It is a predominantly middle-class sport. There are groups who are looking to kind of change that and make it a sport for everyone. But that change has been slow. And as we are very much, I guess, I don't know what the word is that I'm looking for, but the American mindset is one of you got to win, right? And especially in the youth setup, where you're trying to develop players, you have a lot of parents who are looking at a collegiate system, trying to get their kids into the best school, et cetera, and really trying to push kids in a certain direction when really what they need to be doing is just playing and enjoying the game. So our system still has a lot of things to work out of itself. And, U.S. soccer is going to play a major role in that, obviously. But I think the outlook that I have, at least, and I happen to work in the youth system here in the United States, and so I can speak firsthand on this. I think it is overall positive. I think we're getting more kids playing, which is what we want, and it's really transitioning them from playing for fun into that more competitive space, and getting players that could perform at a high level overseas, the Premier League is huge over here. That has been something that has propelled the sport in the United States, is being able to turn on the TV every Saturday morning and watch, Arsenal versus Nottingham Forest or whatever. So that has been
coming up. It's coming up. They haven't quite played that one yet.
Yeah, right.
It is coming up, actually.
Right. Yeah. So, how our national team does going into the World Cup or at the World Cup next year I think will be big as well. As I was saying, Americans love a winner. And right now, especially after this last international break, the United States men's national team is in a bit of a slump at the moment. We didn't have a great international break. Lost to Panama, last minute winner for them. That advanced them to the final of Nations League. We went to the third place game and ended up losing to our rivals to the North, Canada. And so, yeah, it's a bit of a momentum killer. So
we must annex Canada. Then we will have their best players.
Before you start talking about annexing Canada, let me just tell you something about Canada. So we've done the Canadian jokes now. We've run out, Joe. I should tell people who are wondering what they're tuning into that this is the Brazilian Shirt Name podcast, weekly podcast, of course, Legendino and myself. Talk about football generally. We always look at a iconic match and try and sort of go back and discuss it with the benefit of hindsight and look at the cultural and musical soundtrack of the time as well. Obviously, we're talking about the World Cup in general, so we're not talking about a specific match, Joe. Let's talk about how Canada beat the USA. Oh, I love the sound of that.
Joe, I'm claiming credit, which maybe is no longer credit.
All right.
For Pochettino getting the USA job. And I'll tell you why. Because I was asked, it was by ESPN, can you think of a possible candidate for a piece they were doing to get the US job? But it was vacant. And I thought Pochettino. Pochetino's perfect. He's perfect. Likes young players, speaks enough English, Spanish as well, obviously. It's his native language. So I did a little piece explaining why Pochettino would be perfect for the job. I am told that at the time the article was printed, USA weren't thinking of him. And then after it was printed, someone from Pochettino's staff got in touch with USA Soccer and they took it from there. So I'm claiming, obviously, that someone read my article and put it all together. Where did I go wrong?
Not getting paid for it is where you went wrong.
Yeah, he has come in and to be honest with you, it's been a bit underwhelming. I don't know exactly what the reasons are for that. As you mentioned, he likes to work with young players. I think it might just be the player pool that he has at the moment. And for years we've been talking about how this is one of the best player pools that the United States has ever had, and I still think that is the case. I just think that perhaps over the last week, there's been some light shed on the team, that there's still work to do. And perhaps, it's not a team that's necessarily going to go out and win the World Cup. We obviously hope it does. But, I think it was a bit of a reality check. So, Canada, on the other hand, they brought in Jesse Marsh, an American coach. He has really put the fire underneath the whole team. They've brought in Canada has brought in quite a few players to strengthen their national team. We saw Promise David in this international break. We saw the player at Bournemouth. I can't remember his name right now, but he made his debut as well. And there have been some others. And so, Canada has really come on strong in ever since they brought in Marsh. And they were looking good before that anyways, right? They had a great World Cup. We enjoyed watching them in that. And they've just kind of gone from strength to strength. And so, after this Nations League was all settled and done, I think it's clear that Mexico is at the top of CONCACAF, followed by Canada, Panama, then probably the United States at this point. So,
outside your region.
Sorry, I was going to say Daniel Jebison.
Daniel Jebison, thank you. Yes.
Sorry, you go ahead. Yes. I've only just Googled it. So,
yeah.
I saw you kind of head bowed, tapping away. I thought, I know what he's doing. I know he's.
Well, we're on point. We're on point.
Indeed. Outside, I mean, because you cover the waterfront, don't you? National team football, all over the place. Now, there's this group of Argentines who, over the last few years, they've got together for every San Marino game, and it's just their thing, you know. And I think it was last year, they won a game. They won a game, and you could see all these Argentines absolutely crying with joy, and really, you know, because they've invested a lot in following this San Marino. Are there teams around the world that you and your site has a kind of special fondness for?
Oh gosh. Well, so I will take that personally, and I can speak a little bit for my co-host, but personally, I'm a big fan of Oceania, and I'm a big fan of Comoros. So
actually, it's a good song, and Comoros, it just works. It's a good song.
Yes. So, you know, that's just a few off the top of my head. I'm also a big Norway fan. I'd really like to see them get to the World Cup again, and they look pretty good for it. So I'm excited about that. But yeah, my co-host, he tends to go for like Equatorial Guinea. Of all countries, he's a big Equatorial Guinea fan.
It's a good one. Yeah. They've got a good kit as well. You know, you can't say anything wrong against Equatorial Guinea, apart from the politics, obviously.
But no, we do try to cover everybody on an equal basis. But it is true, there are nations that we tend to lean in towards a little bit more, and those are some of them. So
when Tim was talking about the Argentinian fans there, oh, you got a question here, Joe. But when Tim was talking about the Argentinian fans, I wondered if your president and the United States Border Control is ready for the onslaught of fans from Argentina driving the kind of VW buses that the hippies drove on Route 66 from New York.
I don't know if they can go that far. It's a long way. They all drove up to Brazil, but I don't think those cars and beaten up seventh-hand vans, I don't think they'd make it all the way to North America.
So the question, Joe, from Gary is basing US MNT solely in LA SoFi, times two, and Seattle going to be a help or hindrance in terms of the in-stadium support for USA?
Yeah, good question. I think it'll be a help in Seattle. Seattle's traditionally shown pretty strong for men's national team matches.
Seahawks.
Yes, that's right. In terms of LA, it's kind of hit or miss. I suspect that with something as big as the World Cup, you're probably going to have a pro USA crowd. But again, I think a lot of that depends on who we're playing. Obviously, LA is very diverse. A
lot of Latin Americans in LA.
Yeah, I mean, the World Cup, the people who go, it's the Latin Americans. I mean, the game in Russia, Panama against Belgium, and there's more fans from Panama in the stadium than there are fans from Belgium. And we've seen, just as the continent, and I include Panama as South America, really, you lot nicked it so you could build your canal, wheedled it away from Colombia. As it gets, and the Mexican traveling army, Colombian traveling army, and I wonder how this is going to play out with all the deportation issues. You know, this again, you know, all roads lead back to the politics. But this fascinates me. You know, how they're going to cope with this massive influx from south of the Rio Grande. That seems to me to be a possible administrative headache.
Yeah, I would agree with you. And again, that's something that we'll be very interested in kind of watching and following to see how that progresses. But yeah, it's there is potential there for, I don't know, for some issues, I guess. It's pretty.
It all depends. It all depends on how much Infantino has sold FIFA down the river for this World Cup, because if he's doing his job, he should ensure that all governments know, as the Olympic Games do, look, if you're going to be barring people from coming into your country, we can't have the tournament in your country. If he's doing his job, it should be that way. If he's not doing his job, then America gets, because I've already heard that it's the White House that have the direct conversation with FIFA rather than the US footballing authorities. Have you heard that? Have you heard that there is like a direct conversation going on? FIFA's argument is that, well, it pays to just directly talk to the people who've got the power to move things forward and who've got the money ultimately, or the wherewithal and the say so, than to talk to the sort of individual footballing bodies in America. Have you heard this? Because I'd have thought that was pretty controversial.
Yeah, I personally have not heard that, but that again, it might be an area where I'm not necessarily too connected. So
sure, why should you be?
Yeah,
I mean, we'd love to talk football rather than talk the politics of the situation. Let's talk the football then. Let's talk the football.
Okay.
As most people know, the World Cup next year will be in the United States, Mexico, and Canada, as we've been saying. So we know 3 countries that have already qualified. Nudge, nudge, wink, wink. A nudge is as good as a wink to a blind bat. Congratulations, you've qualified.
Thank you. Yes.
Without lifting a finger, despite getting beaten by Panama and Canada, you have qualified.
Yes. We did.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yes, we did, along with our neighbors to the north and south.
Well, you say the neighbors to the north and south, and we can look at the qualified teams here. Japan and Iran are the only other 2 teams that have qualified, and that Iran certainly might pose an interesting dilemma for the politics of the United States. But let's talk about the 3 teams that are hosting who automatically qualify, of course, and that's the right and proper way, and is the legitimate qualification. I'm not taking the mickey out of it or anything like that. It is a legitimate qualification. But out of those 3, I think only one of those teams would have qualified if they weren't the host. Or am I wrong? I mean, you've mentioned Jesse Marsch, for example, and I can totally see why, from your explanation, he's doing well with Canada, as he did with Leeds previously, when he first came there, at least. But he seems to have found his comfort zone in Canada for the moment. And how America missed out on him as a coach is actually shocking when you think about it, because he was the most successful American coach, arguably, of all time in European football. Anyway, that aside, but out of those 3 host nations, which do you think, and it doesn't have to be one, I went for 1, but you can go for 2 or 3, do you think would have qualified for this World Cup if they weren't hosts?
Yeah, so let me correct you just slightly, Dalton. We've actually had four teams outside of the host qualify: Argentina and New Zealand, Iran, and Japan. So
apologies.
But going back to your question, I would argue you'd probably get 2 out of the 3, and probably all 3 would have stood a very good chance of qualifying. I think if there's one that maybe you would knock off at this point based off of current form, could potentially have been the United States. I think Mexico and Canada are looking good. There's a lot of there's a lot of give and take with that, right? Obviously, it depends on the draw and who we would be playing, right? But CONCACAF as a confederation as a whole is getting stronger, and so we're seeing a new generation come through with Costa Rica. They're looking really good. Honduras is starting to rebuild. Panama looks good. Jamaica's hit or miss.
I was about to say exactly the same thing. Exactly the same 3 words. That's hit or miss, Yeah,
they look good in some matches, and then they go up against some of the bigger fish in CONCACAF, and they really struggle. So it's almost an unknown, which Jamaica side is going to show up per se. But so I would like to think that all 3 of them probably would have qualified. That would be the hope. Obviously, the U.S. had a disaster 2 cycles ago, but I think we're a different team now, and I think we've gotten better since then. So I would like to think that we would be there. And I like what Canada is doing right now. I think they're very strong, and I think Mexico is strong as well.
Well, although, I mean, I would have said Mexico, every time they get on the pitch in World Cups, you wonder why they are, the unsung heroes or of Central America, certainly, and if not Central and North America. They're exciting to watch. They've always been. They always play fast football, fast front foot football, etc. I think that has to do with, that's a cultural way of playing football, certainly. But Canada really impressed in the last World Cup. They really did impress, initially at least. And when was the last time the USA were in a World Cup?
Yeah, well, we were in the last one.
Oh yeah, of course you were. Of course you were. But you got knocked out pretty early, though, didn't you?
Well, so we made it. We made it to the knockouts, but then we got knocked out. Yes, yes, that is correct.
Look, that's not bad going. That's not bad.
Then we had missed the one prior to that in Russia. We did not qualify for that one. So,
I was asking Tim earlier, what's the point of qualification? And he seemed to think, as you heard, he was like, give all these, smaller nations a chance. And I get that. Are the qualification rounds followed in America beyond the most avid football fans? Because, a World Cup is a spectacle. It's like the Super Bowl, but you don't expect the general American football fan, we call it American football, NFL fan, to have, watched all the stages leading up to the Super Bowl too. But everybody shows up for the Super Bowl. All the advertisers show up for the Super Bowl. Kendrick Lamar shows up for the Super Bowl, and in my opinion, plays quite a lean set. But that's my opinion. Yeah, a lot of people thought it was an amazing set. Don't get me wrong, but people show up for the Super Bowl. They don't show up necessarily for the preamble. And I wonder whether people follow America's qualifications, because here in England, as you know, every round of qualification, it doesn't matter whether it's against Albania or whether it's against Latvia, we don't care. We follow it, and it's potentially front page news.
Yeah, so my immediate answer to that would be no, and the large reason for that is because the United States, along with Mexico and Canada right now, in terms of qualification rounds, we get a pass. So in terms of Gold Cup qualification, we're already in. We are the highest seeds in the region, so we automatically qualify. We don't have to go through any qualification process really to get through the Gold Cup. We kind of did. There was a Nations League round back in the November window that we needed to get through Trinidad in order to reach the Gold Cup. So there was only one round. So it's very simple qualification for that. For the World Cup, obviously we're hosting, so nothing to do there in terms of this cycle. And then the US, Canada, and Mexico, in terms of Nations League itself, we actually don't participate in that until the later rounds, until we drop in at the quarterfinal stage. So my personal opinion is I don't actually like that. I would love to see the United States, Canada, and Mexico go to some of these countries and get experience playing in the office in Kingston, right? And playing, in Panama City, playing in Guatemala City, right? Like this, I think would be valuable experience for us. But as it is, we are not getting that experience.
Sure. Well, let's talk about your experience and your specialism with the window, which is looking at these World Cup matches all around the world. And it's a shame that Tim's disappeared for now. Hopefully he'll come back so that I can remind him of what the score was when Argentina met Brazil earlier on, as we speak, indeed. What do you want to tell everybody what the score was, those who don't know?
Yeah, 4-1 to Argentina.
It's incredible, isn't it?
Yeah, it was quite the showing by Argentina. Obviously, they were playing at home in front of their fans, completely packed out stadium, so that they were gunning for the win. They came into that match already knowing that they've qualified for the World Cup. Bolivia's draw with Uruguay earlier pushed Argentina over the edge and into that official qualification for the World Cup. So even if Argentina had lost that match, they were still in and qualified at that time. But they went out. I think that gave them maybe a little extra push even for this game. They were super pumped to have qualified once again. The returning champions now, the defending champions. And so they looked really strong, and Brazil right now is kind of limping around. They're really struggling. They were coming off a win against Colombia, which was a good win, but they just looked second best the whole match against Argentina. A lot of and I don't know if Tim would agree with this, but a lot of individual stars trying to shine, and much less of like the collective, right? And I think that's one of the big issues is Dorval Jr. hasn't been able to figure out, or hasn't had the gumption even maybe to sit some of the guys that he needs to in order to make the team flow much better, right? You've got so many different superstars, playing at Real Madrid and Arsenal and, everywhere. And
Nottingham Forest, Murillo is supposed to be the centre back, isn't he? And where was he?
Correct. Yeah. And so, that is a real issue. And I wonder, one of the questions I was going to pose to Tim is, is surely Dorval Jr. is in the hot seat at this point in time. And I don't think that they're not going to qualify. I think qualification for Brazil is nearly done. So that's not the issue here. The issue is, what are they going to look like as we go into 2026, right? What kind of form are they going to be in? Because right now they're really struggling to find themselves and to be like that Brazil team that everybody like wants to see, right? This flair, attacking, like, as people remember it from old, right? And
but people
it just hasn't come that way.
But people also do remember Brazil, and I think you were alluding towards or aiming towards this kind of perspective a moment ago. Correct me if I'm wrong. People also do remember Brazil as being a team of individual stars, don't they?
Yes.
Sure, in the past, the likes of Pele fitted in, despite the fact he clearly was the star figure, or, in later times, the likes of the original Ronaldo, etc. He was a centre forward. He was the one that was going to get all the goals and get all the glory, but he was part of a complete unit. I wonder whether that culturally is holding Brazil back now, when they're calling for Neymar to be the leading striker. You're looking and thinking, well, are you sure about that? Vinicius Jr., fair enough, he's probably one of 2 or 3 of the best players in the world right now. He's always going to make the team with his eyes closed, but is he, Vinicius Jr., part of a Brazil set up, or is he, let's pass it to Vinicius and let him do his own individual talent, use his talent to get us a goal, to put us ahead? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I know what you mean, and I agree. I think, it's very much an individualized team at the moment. You've got guys that are perhaps not fighting for the shirt like people want to see. And
collectively,
that,
at least
collective, correct?
because
Yeah,
I'm sure they feel that they're fighting for the shirt. So why are you giving me all this grief?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Collectively, and so that presence as a unit and that ability to be a bright shining star, but also to do that for the better of the collective, is something that I think is missing. And as you alluded to earlier, that was something that was present with past Brazilian teams, right? You had the superstars, but they understood their role within the team. And perhaps right now that is missing for Brazil. Dorval Jr. hasn't been able to bring that together.
Yeah, and it's a shame that Tim isn't here, like you say. He's probably got a call from Brazilian television asking them to explain, or probably French television asking him to explain how come Brazil lost 4-1 to Argentina. That wasn't the only result from last night, though. Chile drew with Ecuador, 0-0 draw. Colombia drew with Paraguay. And Venezuela beat Peru 1-0 as well. How many of those did you see, and what can you tell us about those results?
I saw them all. I had them all going. It was an amazing comeback from Paraguay, whose incredible rise continues. Gustavo Alfaro has completely come in and just completely changed this Paraguay team. They looked done and dusted a year ago, and he's come in and completely turned it around. So they had quite the amazing comeback last night against Colombia. Julio Enciso's goal was absolutely gorgeous. If you haven't had a chance to look at that, I definitely recommend checking that out. That was amazing to level it up. And yeah, Paraguay comes away from Colombia with a valuable point. And so, yeah, they're looking really good. I think Paraguay probably is nearly assured of a place in 2026 at this point in time. I think one of the bigger stories is the 7th place race for that playoff, for the Intercontinental playoff, right? And so at this point, we're kind of projecting it's like a 2-horse race. You've got Venezuela and you've got Bolivia. Now, my co-host is an actuary in real life, so he's very good with numbers.
What is an actuary? Is that an accountant? Is it?
No, it's actually somebody who can predict risk. So,
right,
in terms of like stock markets and other things, right?
Oh wow!
So
Can you predict who's going to win the World Cup?
I'm sure he absolutely could. Yeah, in fact, he does. He's got spreadsheets and spreadsheets full of numbers. He's our numbers guy. So,
who's going to win the 230 at Cheltenham?
Yeah, I was going to ask that, but I thought it was a little bit unseemly of us to go for the guttural.
Yeah. At this point, he's got Venezuela projected with 79% chance of getting to that 7th spot. Bolivia, he's got sitting at.
You know what the next game is? The next game is Venezuela at home to Bolivia. So that distance, which is 1 point, it could be 4 points. It's on Venezuela. They've won one game in the last 10, which was last night. And here they are with a possibility of sneaking a playoff place. But it's that cushion that makes Brazil all right. Because they've got a 6-point cushion over a team that's won one game in 10. And that means that Brazil are going.
So Brazilians are taking it quite well, getting beaten 4-1 by Argentina, are they? Doing the samba. Doing the samba
delirious. No, absolutely delirious. No, it was a shellacking. I think it's probably worse than the 7-1. Because the 7-1, there's an emotional pressure and there's a few mad minutes when like 5 goals going bang, 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 bang. This, from start to finish, was 90 minutes of relentless humiliation where, Argentina do the decent thing and let Brazil have a goal. Go on. Score a goal. We'll give you a goal. We'll give you one. And they could have scored 10. The gulf between the two teams was embarrassing.
Wow. Yeah, I did wonder that. And whilst you were off explaining to French television how Brazil lost 4-1 to Argentina.
I was explaining to my internet that it had to work. Go on. You can do it.
Yeah, it's done it. Anyway, we're going through the matches. So we've done the South America ones from last night, Joe. I must say, I don't know how you do it, have, multi-screen it, etc. But well done you for covering them all. I suppose we should go on to other nations. Do you literally cover the whole world? Because you know
the
how
waterfront. He covers the waterfront.
We do
so
try.
How's the African qualifying going then?
Yeah, so Africa is one of our favorite continents. There's such parity across the entire continent that it makes it so much fun.
Please go easy on Nigeria. I know what you're going to say, but go easy.
Yeah, so we're going to definitely talk about Nigeria. In fact, sure, why not? Since you brought them up, we'll go there. So, again, my co-host right now, we're projecting Nigeria with a 4% chance to qualify directly for the World Cup and an 8% chance to reach the playoffs. So, not looking very good for Nigeria right now.
That's not good. What's gone wrong?
So they had a slow start, and I think it killed them. The slow start absolutely killed them. And they have this thing where they tend to leak late goals. That's what happened yesterday against Zimbabwe. It's really crazy. They have such talent, and for them to be in this position is mind-boggling.
I thought as soon as the World Cup got expanded, I thought, well, that's Nigeria in every time. And you're telling me no. There was a question I asked to Mahir on the World Football phone-in on Monday night, and I didn't get an answer. And that was, Mahir, do you think is there one African side, or maybe more, who you think could put in a real serious, could go deep into the competition this time next year? And since Mahir decided to dodge my question, maybe for diplomatic reasons, Joe Gould. The question is now yours.
Sure. Yeah, actually, I think there's one definite, another that could surprise. I think you have to look at Morocco again, as a potential candidate to go far in the World Cup. They've
got their tails up.
They absolutely do. Incredible team right now, and they continue to bring in a lot of talent. They're pulling players who could represent other nations like Belgium, who are opting to play for Morocco instead. And so it's very telling. I think the one thing about Morocco to be a little bit cautious about at the moment is that the manager is just trying a lot of new things. So he's tweaking, he's fine tuning, and I think that could play into how they do in the World Cup in a positive way, I think. But Morocco would be one of the teams I'd be looking at. I think too, this is an outsider shot, I would say, but one team that has come on very strongly of late is Algeria. They have found a way to unlock Mohamed Amora, who is playing at Wolfsburg. He scored 5 goals over this international break. He had a hat trick yesterday. He scored a brace in their match earlier last week against Botswana. And he also recorded an assist last night as well. So, they've found a way to unlock him, and the team is building into something that I think could be a definite force coming into the World Cup next year. So those would maybe be the two that I'm looking at. There are other nations in Africa who are performing quite well. Egypt is one of them. Ghana had a great window this time around. They're looking good for getting back to the tournament. I think you can't discredit Ivory Coast, or Cote d'Ivoire, but they still have a lot of work to do to get to the World Cup. Gabon is right behind them in the group, so that's a tight race. I think also South Africa is looking really good for qualification. They had a huge window. They beat Benin yesterday, which was a big game because Benin was behind them in the table, and so Africa is going to bring some definite contenders to the World Cup next year,
and they'll bring some flavor to the World Cup as well. Africa's got to be there one way or another.
Oh, they always bring the flavor,
But no Nigerian jollof rice.
Hold on 1 second. I was going to be unlike the chicken tikka mosala. I was going to answer the question that you haven't even asked me, but you kind of were alluding to with Joe, which is how did Nigeria get itself in the mess that it's in? May I offer one suggestion anyway, which is that after losing the final of the African Cup of Nations last year, as always with Nigeria, we're kind of the West African Netherlands, or the way that Netherlands used to be. The Netherlands aren't kind of the arguing Dutchmen anymore.
Are you lower than the Low Countries?
I like to think we're flying higher as Super Eagles than the Flying Dutchmen, yeah. But thank you for asking. But I think we will still qualify. So it ain't over till it's over. Just
4% chance of direct, 8% chance of the playoff. You heard it from
Tim,
Joe Gould.
What chance has Joe Gould given Tottenham of winning a title ever? Yeah, it ain't going to be high, is it?
And he's been proved right again and again and again.
Live in hope. Mate, anyway, I think that there's been a lot of soul searching, i.e. argumentation within the Nigerian squad since then. And I think like with, to a certain extent, like you were saying about Brazil's individual stars, Victor Osimhen is by and far the star of Nigeria still. And it's who do you listen to, Victor Osimhen, or do you listen to the coach? I think it's one of those. But anyway, we'll wait and see. We'll wait and see what the outcome of the next few weeks will be.
So just to go off of that, Dotun, I would agree, and I do think that is a potential issue. Is Victor Osimhen is their most dangerous player, and teams can cue in on that, right? And so they are packed with lots of other stars, but those stars aren't necessarily performing. So during the games this last break, we saw a lot of trying to bomb down the wings, send a cross in, trying to find Osimhen. for the goal. It worked in their first match. It didn't work last night, right? Zimbabwe cued into that, and then they went and found a way to pinch an equalizer. So, yeah, that is definitely something that Eric Schell still has to work out for them.
I mean,
And
but
I was going to say to him that, you know, the problem is you Nigerians are an argumentative bunch.
We are.
He was going to reply, no, we're not. And I was going to rest my case.
Can I just add as well, while we're still on Africa, I think one potential storyline that is worth watching, there are many, but one that is worth watching is actually Cape Verde. This little island nation is sitting in the top of a group with Cameroon, Libya, Angola. Angola is a nation that we've been very high on. They are really coming on strong. They've reached the AFCON again. Cape Verde did not, but in their World Cup qualifying group, they beat Angola yesterday. They have a 1-point lead over Cameroon right now. They've got a 5-point lead over Libya. It's really crazy. It would be amazing if this little tiny island nation made their debut in the World Cup. I mean, it would just be sensational.
Do you know when Tim asked you about, you know, which is your small nation? Yeah. Mine was Cape Verde. Yeah, mine has always been Cape Verde, and I don't know why. It's just one of those islands.
It's because it's where Horace Silver's father was from.
Is that why? Oh, I didn't know. I didn't know that was where he was from, but that's obviously why. Yeah, I've always gone for Cape Verde. You're right.
And on that note, song from your father. I've got to love you and leave you. So
yeah, we're going to love you all and leave you. Thank you,
Cheers.
Tim and Joe.
Thanks, Tim.
It's been an absolute pleasure. How can we follow the window anyway? How can we watch the window?
Yes, you can. We're on X at Window INTL Pod, so you can go follow us there. We do have an Instagram page. We're trying to build that up, but yeah, and then obviously our podcast, which we'll be doing a full review of the entire window, which they do tend to go on for a long time. So if you don't like long pods, this may not be your thing. But if you like an in-depth review, and when we're talking 2.5 hours, and we usually break it up, so we're talking about 5 hours of content here.
It's labor of love, mate. You know, that's what football is, labor of love. But we can follow you. Just go to the window on X, or if we just Google the window, will we get there, or do we need to Google?
You should, yeah, you should. And again, you can listen to our show. We're on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, you know, the whole gamut. So at Window INTL Pod is where you can find us on X and Instagram, and then our podcasts you can find on.
And as you mentioned Instagram, I should tell everybody we've still got an Alexis McAllister signed shirt for you to win. We've got one Alexis McAllister signed shirt from our Brazilian Shirt Name podcast for you to win. If you like a chance of winning that, whether you're a Liverpool Red or whether you're an Argentina fan or you just want a football shirt signed by its wearer, then do go and check us out, Brazilian Shirt Name Podcast on Instagram. That's the way you enter the draw, as it were. Joe, it's been an absolute pleasure. Let's do it again, because there'll be many opportunities between now and the World Cup, you know, to talk about Donald Trump. So let's do it again.
Happy to come on. Thank you for having me.